At Trellis, that's something we really believe in. We want to make sure that we're setting you up for success in terms of what that looks like. And so these webinars are just one of the ways we're doing that. We will be also providing a lot more content that you can be using throughout the course of this year too. But before we get too far into it, I wanted to actually throw another question in the chat, and I'm hoping that you can help me answer this. Have each of you ever wondered if all the work behind your fundraising is really worth it? Feel free to throw it in the chat there. A quick yes, no. I don't know if that resonates with you, but have you ever wondered if it's really all worth all the effort, the time, the energy that you're putting in? I'm seeing some yeses. I'm seeing a lot of yeses come in. Steve, Mark, Alicia, Sandra, Laura. A lot of sweat and tears, absolutely. Yeah, I figured that would resonate. I think as fundraisers, there's a lot of work behind what we do, and sometimes it's hard for us to see the actual results, maybe until later on, and sometimes we wonder if they're ever coming. But in this webinar, in this next little bit, this next hour, I'm hoping we can really start to change that. And so first, before we get too far in, wanted to quickly introduce myself. I'm Rebecca. I work with the team here at Trellis. I've supported hundreds of organizations with their fundraising, from galas to golf tournaments, raffles, to all sorts of dinners and events like that as well. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce you to Aimee. She's joining us from Alberta SPCA. And she is their director of advancement there. She's worked really closely on some raffles that they've been hosting, and we'll be jumping into one of the raffles here in just a minute. As well, we have put together some content that I'm actually going to ask more, if you wouldn't mind throwing it into the chat here for everybody right now. But there is a guide that we've put together really around some of the pieces we'll be talking about today of how can you turn your event attendees into long-term donors, or your raffle ticket purchasers into long-term donors. That's going to all make a lot more sense in a little bit here. But in order for you to really make the most out of this session, I definitely encourage you to grab a copy of the link. And we're going to throw it in the chat here in just a second so that you can download a copy and hopefully be able to take your learning a little bit further. Well, without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see both Aimee and I at the same time. And we're going to dig into some questions here. So, Aimee, I'm excited to get into this, but maybe to start, can you tell us a little bit about where you work, what your role is, and how long you've been in the fundraising space?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks for having me here today. I'm very excited to talk a little bit about what we're doing. As you said, I'm the Director of Advancement at the Alberta SPCA. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with what an SPCA is or what we do, we actually do animal protection enforcement across Alberta outside of the cities of Edmonton and Calgary. So lots of rural work with some of our small towns and lots of big regions. And I am new to this role. So I started here in October last year. Prior to that, I worked in fundraising and communications for a healthcare foundation. So I joined the team here in October, but have been in the fundraising space for around 10 years now.
Amazing. And what do you love about your job? What are the pieces that make you excited to get out of bed every day and come to work?
Well, I really liked your question about is it worth it? Because I think that's something we have to ask ourselves sometimes. And, our immediate response is always yes, but then there are those really hard days when you start to say, oh my gosh, was it worth it today? But overall, I would say yes. My favorite thing is just connecting donors to causes that they love, to see donors' excitement, or when you're talking to them on the phone and you can just hear how happy they are that their donation, that their support is making a difference in some way to causes that they are really passionate about. That's just the best thing. And I'll just say, working for the Alberta SPCA in particular, I've had a chance to talk to a lot more rural Albertans, which I didn't have in previous roles. And so that's been really interesting, learning about different small towns and kind of what's important to them. And I'm learning all sorts of new agriculture terms as well, which has been very interesting for me. So it's definitely a different role than ones I've had in the past, but I'm really loving it so far.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I know Alberta SPCA has been running raffles for many, many years now and doing a lot over the course of a year too. But this past winter in particular, you moved to Trellis. Do you know what motivated that move and that transition to a new fundraising platform?
Yeah, so as I said, I started in October and the decision to move to Trellis had already been made. So I take no credit for that decision. But in talking to the team, there was a few big factors that really played into that decision. The biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, was the integration with Razor's Edge. So we use the Razor's Edge platform for our donations and for our donors. And the previous software that they'd been using to run their lotteries didn't integrate, which meant that there was a lot of discrepancy between data. And we all know as fundraisers that good data is critical. So that was one of the big motivating factors. And then the other one that the team informed me of was the fact that we were able to add donations and a donation option with Trellis, whereas with our previous software, that wasn't an option. So being able to add on those donation options was another big piece.
Absolutely. And then how did your raffle go this year compared to previous years? What were you expecting? What did you see? I'm sure also just given by like our economy and external factors like that are probably playing into some of those kind of hypotheses that you were setting prior to the launch of this fundraiser. So how did it go?
Yeah, and I was nervous because when I started, the fundraiser or the lottery had just launched. And so, of course, new role, new job, I was digging into a lot of different areas. And so I was definitely nervous and keeping an eye on how the lottery went. So I do have some results. Don't mind me as I look down just to make sure I get the numbers right. But overall, our raffle results were very similar to prior years, which we were really happy with because as you said, there's a lot of mitigating factors right now with the economy. And so we were hoping if we could at least kind of keep those levels the same, we were going to be really happy. So it did stay the same. Our 50-50 ended up with a jackpot of almost $260,000, and our winner walked away with $130,000, which that's such a fun phone call to make, to tell someone you're sending them a six-figure check. And our lottery ended up at 85% sold out, which again, very consistent with where we had been for the previous couple of years.
That's awesome. So fun. It must be so fun. And even for those of you that are listening in right now too, of like to be able to make those calls and to thank donors for their support, but also letting them know that they're going to get something in return. So great. Amazing. But beyond that, you also added in the donation piece, which you just mentioned about, or a little bit earlier. So tell me about that. How did adding donation upsells impact the results that you actually saw?
Well, I think first of all, adding the donation upsell was super easy. And that's one thing that we, again, really liked when we made the move to Trellis. It integrates so well with the fundraising page that it just looks like a natural piece. It doesn't look awkward and it doesn't feel awkward from a user experience point of view, which was really important to us. And so I went through and tested a couple times myself, pretending that I was doing the lottery purchase just to make sure it was a natural process and comfortable for our donors, which it was. It was also super easy, like very little time to set up. We were able to throw in custom donation options. So we developed our own gift array, and we did a $5, a $10, and a $25 option, as well as a custom donation option. So they had 4 options to donate. And I was curious. I didn't know how that gift array was going to work. And so that was one of the things that I went back and looked at afterwards. And we found that the split was fairly even between those 4 options. So that's interesting. And definitely something I want to test in the future is, if we were to kind of play with that gift array, could we even do more donations, or is there something that our donors would kind of resonate more with if there was a different donation option? So it was very simple. It was very easy for the donors to use. We had lots of donations, as we'll talk about. So
Absolutely. And so, tell us, what was the result of having donation upsells? And then if we were to think about it from like an ROI, return on investment perspective, how much time did you spend on it compared to the amount of results you got? Like what did that look like? How did it compare?
Sure. So I think it's important to start by saying I have run lotteries at previous organizations. So I had a bit of an idea of what a typical donation with lottery was. And so I definitely had some preconceived notions going in of what our donations would look like. Even though this is a fairly big lottery, I still kind of knew, typically lotteries don't raise a lot in donations. I wasn't expecting it to raise a lot. And I can still remember the day that our database coordinator was showing me the Trellis reports, and she was saying, okay, here's where we're at with lottery. And I asked her, like, what's this line? What is this $16,000? And she said, well, that's donations. And I was like, no, there's a mistake. That can't be donations. We're only 7 weeks into this lottery. there's no way that's donations. And so she went back and re-pulled the reports and came back and said, no, that actually is where we're at for donations. So then my next thought was like, wow, I've been doing lotteries wrong this whole time and they've figured something out here. And so I went and looked at what they had actually budgeted for lottery donations to see if this was kind of on track with what the plan was. And no, historically, the organization had only budgeted around $1,000 per lottery for donations. We were at 16,000 in week 7. So halfway-ish, not even halfway through our lottery, we were already at $16,000. So yeah, I was just blown away. And of course, after that, I started paying closer attention to that number. And as you have mentioned at the end of it, we ended up just over $30,000 in donations for our Christmas lottery.
Which is like absolutely incredible. And then you and I had another conversation because you since then have now done 2 more raffles. One lottery has come and gone, and then you're in your current one. What were your thoughts around that one? Were you expecting different results, the same results? How did that go?
Yeah, I wasn't really sure. Again, it was kind of, I thought, is this just like a one-time anomaly where people saw this donation button and felt like they should make a one-time gift and then they're never going to give again? And so I was watching our subsequent lotteries really closely. And we run a Christmas cash lottery that ended around mid-December. And then we immediately go into another lottery, which we call our New Year's lottery. It's only a 50-50. It only runs for 4 weeks. And with that 4-week lottery, we raised another $20,000 in donations. So amazing. So basically $50,000 in donations that were unplanned for in that last quarter of the year. Who doesn't love that? Who isn't excited to tell their boss about that? And then on top of that, we had our spring lottery, which just launched just over a month ago. And so again, I was kind of keeping an eye on donations because I thought, well, maybe it's one of those things where everybody's just donating because it's the end of the year, it's the holidays, they want to get a tax receipt before the end of 2023. And so I've been, diligently pulling those reports. And honestly, I've still seen, so we're, like I said, about 4 or 5 weeks into the lottery right now, and we're over $8,000 in donations for this lottery now as well. So
Which is incredible. I actually just took a look because I was curious, and yeah, we're like, you're closer to the 10,000 mark for donations for this one right now. And it's so fun on our end to be able to watch these and have these conversations with you and some of our other organizations too, of like, hey, we budgeted that we were gonna maybe make like 5,000. And now we're talking about 50,000, and the impact that that has on your organization is significant. That's money you weren't expecting to see. Those are unrestricted funds that you're now getting, which we weren't planning on. So it's absolutely incredible. And what I also love is you mentioned at the beginning, this took you about 10 minutes to do. And I'm assuming, let's assume it was 10, let's say even 20 minutes per fundraiser. So an hour of time, and now you've just walked away with $50,000. That's not a small piece. I love it. Oh,
and
yeah.
no, and I'll just add, like, ROI, we don't do the tax receipting, right? So the tax receipting is done automatically for us. So there's not even a lot of the back end work with it as well. So yeah, truly it is 10 minutes of setup. Finding the pictures is the hardest part.
Yeah, exactly. And in your case, we're like looking for animal pictures. So it's also like not the worst job ever. So it's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Well, the other piece that you mentioned that was a really big deciding factor in moving over to Trellis was Razor's Edge. And so that piece kind of comes in a little bit more as we talk about like your post fundraiser. But what does this integration do for you, and why does that matter for your organization?
Yeah, I think as fundraisers, we know that data is critical to doing the work that we do. We need to know what our donors are telling us, and data is a great way to be able to pull out information. And unfortunately, in the past, there wasn't a good way for their previous software systems, which there has been a couple that they've used here, to integrate with our donor database system, Razor's Edge. So that was one thing right off the top I was super excited about, because I've also worked with different systems, and it's a lot of work to either find a way to import information or to basically have information existing in 2 different spaces, which is what we had here. So we had Excel spreadsheets full of old lottery data, and then our Razor's Edge system with all our donor data. And so the ability to integrate the two, it just is so helpful for me, especially as a leader setting direction with my organization and making decisions. How many lotteries should we be running? Who should we be soliciting for donations? And we weren't able to do that before. And so right now we've been working with your team, as you know, to get that integration working. And we're still customizing a couple of things because we definitely have some unique pieces to our database that we wanted to make sure are done right before we sort of flip that switch and turn it on. But from what we've seen so far, we're really excited about the ability to actually get all of that lottery information directly into our database.
Totally. Yeah, I'm excited because I think we're almost there, and the ability for you to see all of that information is going to be so critical on your end. And so specifically with some of the individual donors that are coming into Razor's Edge that we're going to be importing in there or syncing into there, is there any like specifics of like, hey, these are things we're looking into, or these are things we're curious about that we're going to be able to do now with our integration?
I mean, everything, excuse me, everything from, I love the ability to figure out where our donors are coming from. So what I'm most curious to see is, are our lottery purchasers, were they donors first and then purchase lottery, or are they lottery purchasers who've become donors? And I think we're probably going to see a lot of crossover between the two. So that just gives us so much more insight when we're making decisions about who are we going to mail to, who are we going to add to our email list, and what segments of our email list should they live within. When we're reaching out to donors and just having a conversation, now we'll be able to see like, oh, they're also a lottery purchaser. So we can say, oh, by the way, did you know our new lottery is starting next week? Or, hey, I saw you actually won the lottery at some point. So being able to have that information cross over just is going to make decision making across all of our fundraising channels that much more, I guess, like identifying where the donors want to give and how they want to give. It just makes it easier for us to do that.
Absolutely. One of the things I'm really curious about, and I'm really excited to learn based on what you tell me, similar to what you just mentioned, is are we seeing the same individuals buy tickets and make donations at all three raffles and all three lotteries? Or is it new ticket purchasers and donors for each one? And I think based on what you find, your strategy is also going to be different. Like if you find that you've got the same donors that are buying raffle tickets and donating for three raffles in a row, they're clearly connected to your cause. And in my opinion, I think they're hinting to you that they're looking for more ways to support your organization. And it might be worth then your engagement team reaching out, getting on a call with them, or having a meeting with them and seeing how we can get these individuals even more connected to the cause, supporting in other ways and what that looks like. But then on the flip side, I think if it's a new donor that's making a raffle ticket purchase and a donation for each raffle individually, so they're not participating in all three, I think then the question becomes is how can we increase the awareness that these individuals have about your cause? Because they're clearly somewhat interested. They're taking an extra step to make a donation, but maybe they need to learn more about who you are, or we need to build some more awareness, and your engagement team can then focus on that. So I think as you think about long term, your strategy around how you support these donors is going to be vastly different depending on what you find. And so I'm really excited for you to dig into that too. And then for those of you that are joining too, I think, thinking about how do you change or adjust your long-term relationship kind of donor strategy depending on what you're seeing in your data is really important. It's not going to be the same for every single donor that you're speaking to. It's actually could be vastly different, and that's okay. And if the impact, if the results are there and we can start to see these individuals become long-term donors, then it's definitely worth the time and the effort that each of them may take. I'm actually going to make we're going to just jump over here into just some questions around what you've been learning through this process. I mean, you've shared so many really great pieces already, Aimee. But what have you learned from the three raffles that you've now run on Trellis that you're going to take into future fundraisers moving forward? And at the same time, if you wouldn't mind, or Justin, if you wouldn't mind just throwing in the links to one, Aimee's Christmas lottery that we were just chatting about, as well as the current lottery that she's running, the spring one as well, just so everybody can see what her pages look like, how she set things up. And also, if you live in Alberta and want to buy some raffle tickets, this is also your moment. But yeah, Aimee, if you could just let us know, like, what have you learned that now moving forward are going to be important pieces that you include in all your fundraisers or raffles?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the plug too. Yes, please buy all the raffle tickets. There's a couple things that I think are really critical. So The first one is, if you're running a raffle, don't be afraid to add a donation option. I think probably in the past, and I've definitely heard this, it's like, no, lottery purchasers just want to purchase lottery, so don't ask them for a donation, don't add a donation. So that's something that we've definitely learned, that we will always include a donation option on any page, any lottery, anything that we run. And in fact, we have a mail component to our raffle, so we do a mailing piece as well. And I just met with our designer the other day and mentioned I'd love to figure out a way to add a donation option on the mailing piece as well, which we've never done before. But why not? It's been so successful for the online components. I can't imagine it not being hopefully equally successful for the mailing piece. So that certainly taught us something that we needed, a good lesson. The other thing is just stewarding our lottery donors and our lottery purchasers as donors, and remembering that although, yes, they're getting something for their donation, they're not getting a tax receipt, they're, maybe not doing it for the same reasons that everybody else donates, they are still supporting our cause. And so being sure to steward them and thank them and appreciate them in the same ways that we appreciate our regular donors. And the biggest lesson for me, I think, was not always playing those sort of old records that, lottery purchasers are not donors and they're never going to be donors. They're only in it to win it, kind of thing. That was something that I've heard for many, many years since I've run lotteries. I've been told that. And I can honestly say I've repeated that to other new junior fundraisers as we're talking about lotteries. And holy, was this a humbling experience for me to realize that could not be less true. Donors are out there everywhere, and they are lottery purchasers, and they will choose to make a donation if we give them the opportunity. So that was my big lesson.
Yeah, it's funny, those old narratives that we do, like you said, you kind of replay of like, well, they're not donors like the other donors I have, so maybe we treat them differently, maybe we do that. It's funny when you kind of get to a certain point in your career or as you're working on projects where you're like, hey, wait, like, let's choose curiosity to see how could this maybe be different if we approached it differently or if we tried something new. And it's so fun to see when those results really do pay off. I love that. That's awesome. And I think the other piece that you mentioned there just at the beginning was just more so around the marketing. And I think that marketing piece is really key. And what I loved about raffles specifically, above and beyond other fundraising types, is they're a fantastic way to build awareness for your organization and increase the reach that you have as an organization. And so using your raffle as an opportunity to reach new audiences, to promote your cause, and kind of reach out to individuals beyond your typical network that you reach out to is kind of a great opportunity. I see a lot of lottery or raffle fundraisers actually reach out to different partners and say, hey, we're doing this raffle. Are you able to share it with your community or your network and just start to grow that reach? And typically with raffles, your price point's at a place where it's a little bit lower and it's a great way to invite others in to your organization that maybe some other fundraising options don't provide. So we're almost done here in terms of questions for Aimee. If you do have any questions as well for Aimee, feel free to throw them in the chat at the very end of our session here. We will do a quick Q&A, and I would love to hear, and Aimee would too as well, what questions you have that hopefully we can answer for you as well. But for all of the individuals listening today, Aimee, do you have any actionable next steps that they can take to grow their raffles in the same way that you did?
I mean, I think we talked about quite a few of them. You just touched on marketing. That's a big piece of what we do. And we market across a lot of channels. So we do direct mail marketing. We also do a lot of digital marketing. We do social media marketing. We've done radio ads. So again, to your point about curiosity, I think that's a great place to start, is asking the question of where are our potential lottery purchasers and our potential donors. So how can we reach them? Where are they, and how can we reach them? And we try lots of different things. Every lottery, I sit down with our communications director and we strategize and say, okay, where can we try differently, or how could we spend our marketing budget a little bit differently this time to try something new? So that's a big piece. Email marketing, I forgot to mention that one, but that is a huge part of where our lottery success comes from. And we can see on the days when we send an email, sales skyrocket. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so fun when you are able to see that too, and when you're able to point back to like, oh, that actually worked. That's great. Just in closing here, based on what SPCA has done in the last few years and the success that you've seen in these last few raffles, what have you decided you will never go back to? So if you could tell your pre-pandemic self one thing about fundraising today, what would that be?
Don't make assumptions. Don't get stuck in traditional ways of this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way we have to do it. Our donors will tell us they'll tell us by their responses what they like and what they don't like. And don't put all donors in a bucket. One thing that I think we assumed when we made the move to Trellis and doing a mostly online raffle is that our older donors, they're not going to want to go online and purchase lottery tickets. And we found lots of them do. Lots of them love the convenience of being able to do it online. They do it from their iPads. I talk to them on the phone. Sometimes we have to walk them through some of the steps, but they love the option that they get their tickets right away in their email. So just not making assumptions and not being afraid to try new things, I think is what we won't go back to for sure.
Amazing. I love that. Well, Aimee, I'm gonna let you go for just a few minutes here. And we're gonna invite you back up. I know that there's some questions that have already come into the chat for you around your raffle, but thank you so much for sharing just a little bit more around your organization, what you've done, the successes you've seen, and how that's impacted the way that you're moving forward. And yeah, I really love what you just said. I think as fundraisers, it's so easy for us to become experts and then go into autopilot. And then we start to think that we know what we need to know. But being willing to try and test, and like I mentioned, just have that curiosity allows you to open some new doors. And in your case, that brought in an incredible almost $60,000 in donations. And that's now unrestricted funding for your organization. So thanks again for sharing. Like I said, I will call you back up shortly. And in the meantime, if anybody else does have any questions for Aimee, please throw them in the chat. Like I said, we want to make sure that we can make this a really valuable session for you. So whatever questions you have, we will try and get to all of them at the end here in just about 10 minutes or so. But I wanted to spend the next 10-ish minutes and walking you through some more of the specifics tactically around what Aimee did with her team at Alberta SPCA and some strategies so that you can do the exact same thing. So if we were to look at it, Aimee completed 3 simple steps. One, she launched her fundraiser. Then she added some donation options. And post-event, she's now identifying who her potential long-term donors are based on the purchases that they made. And what I love about these steps is that if you're an organization that brings in hundreds of thousands of dollars in fundraising, or closer to 10,000, if you're brand new to fundraising, or maybe you've been doing it for years, or if you're from a really small rural town or a major city with significant reach, this same strategy will work for you. And as Aimee mentioned, it is so easy to get started. In fact, at Trellis, we've purposely built our fundraising platform that can support you through all of it with all of the fundraising elements that you need. And also, we cover the 3 steps that I just mentioned before. Our goal is to save you even more time and help you get back to what matters most, growing your cause and your long-term donor base. So with Trellis, you can easily launch a fundraiser, add your donation upsells, and then use our tools to identify exactly who is in your donor base. So let's jump into the first one. The first step is how to launch a fundraiser. So yours doesn't have to be a raffle. It could be an upcoming event or golf tournament, online auction, or swag sale. It honestly does not matter. And actually, as I'm thinking about this now, this is great timing because I think for a lot of the organizations I'm talking to right now, they're getting ready for fundraisers coming up in March, April, May. And so I'd really think about how can you apply some of these steps for that specific fundraiser that you're thinking about right now. So with Trellis, you can bring all of your fundraising elements into one single place. And while it's not the topic of our webinar today, maybe a future one, I don't know. When we consider the donor experience, it is so much easier for participants when all of your fundraising is in one single place with one single checkout and one single place to check for updates or announcements about that event or fundraiser that you've got planned. And when setting up your fundraising page, I'd also encourage you, don't miss the opportunity to share more about your cause. In Aimee's case, she had a lot of first-time participants in her raffle. And so by sharing her story and more about the SPCA and the incredible programs and services that they offer, she can educate more people about her cause, especially right before they participate in the fundraiser. Another amazing example of this is our friend Jen with her gala. She included event ticketing, auctions, and she also had a swag bag that people could purchase, as well as a fund a need on the night of her event. And leading up to the event, participants came to a single fundraising page to participate, learn about the foundation, what they're doing, and new projects they're working on. And this awareness and education about their cause became especially valuable as they started to prep for their fund a need, as donors already had a preliminary understanding of the organization before that moment even began. The next step that we see with these 3 steps to a successful raffle is adding your donation upsells. And again, these can look very different depending on what kind of fundraiser you're doing, and it doesn't just have to be a donation upsell for a raffle. So here are the top 3 ways to do that. So I will be really honest with you right now. If I had to pick my favorite donation upsell, this one here might be my favorite. And it's not about a raffle, actually. But I love the idea of donating your auction bids. So here's how it works. When your donors in your silent auction are participating, they'll get a pop-up that says, hey, if you don't win this item, do you want to donate this amount instead, or a different amount to our organization instead? It is so simple for your donors and it's so easy for them to engage. And as your donors are already willing to give that set amount of money for this item, they're going to be pretty willing to also give this amount as a donation to your cause simply because they care. And as they keep increasing their bid amount, they can keep increasing the amount they'd like to donate. We are seeing organizations have incredible success with this, and really similar to what Aimee had mentioned, adding something like a donation auction bid or the option to donate an auction bid honestly takes like less than 2 minutes. And we're seeing organizations raise so much more because of it. Next is the type of donation upsell that Aimee used with her raffle. This would also be the same if maybe people are buying event tickets for your event. But when ticket purchasers are ready to check out, they will see an entire page prompt specifically for donating an auction bid, donating to the organization. On this page, you can see it highlights the different donation options as well as maybe a custom option, and they can learn a little bit more about how their donations actually impact your organization. And again, sharing that story and giving your donors that understanding about your organization is another fantastic way to grow your cause, to help people understand more about who you are and what you do. And finally, the third way that we see people try donation upselling is through bundles. Now, these ones are a little bit different, but I think they have a lot of potential, especially for organizations that do things like golf tournaments. So you could try creating a bundle or package with your event, your raffle ticket, and your donation all wrapped into a single purchase for your donors. Again, not only does it make that donation experience incredibly easy for your donors, it's also a really easy way to incorporate a donation all in one single place. Okay, so we've got all of our donation upsells, but before we move on to the third step, I just want to pause here for 1 second. And I'm telling you that this is important, and kind of what Aimee was telling you is really around how important it is for you to know who your donors are and how you can understand what they look like and how you can continue to engage with them. While it's important to know that information, it's also really important for us to be able to see like how much of an impact does this actually make. And so we took a look at over 1,000 fundraisers and looked at how they were doing with their donations when they added a donation to their different fundraising elements. And so here's what we found. Organizations are raising a minimum of 5% more in donation upselling. And for raffles specifically, we're seeing that organizations are raising 7.6% more because of a donation upsell. And that means that they had at least $1 in donations, and now we're seeing an increase of up to 7.6%. Now, if you just think about that number for a second, and we go back to that question that we asked at the very beginning of, is your fundraising really worth all the effort? I'm going to venture to say that if you're bringing in an extra 7% of donations, it's actually really worth it. And what if, like Aimee, it isn't just one time, but consistently for each of your fundraisers that you run? Quite quickly, those extra dollars will make a significant difference to your organization. And like Aimee said, it only took her 10 minutes to set up. So it's a pretty significant return on investment for just $10. And again, as you look at this, you can see that it's not just raffles that are seeing these results. Like I said, consistently, organizations that are raising at least $1 in donations, they're actually seeing close to 5 to 15%, depending on the types of fundraising drivers they're using. And so we're going to move on to our final step here. But before we get started there, this is a great moment. If you do have any additional questions that on anything I've said or Aimee said at this point, feel free to throw it in the chat. I know there's also a ton of questions already in there, which is great. But feel free to join in there or throw them into the Q&A if you prefer. But now our final step comes as we approach post-event. How can you identify your hidden donors in your database? And I guarantee that you all have some. And before I show you who those hidden donors are and where they may be hiding, for those of you that are using Raiser's Edge, you're definitely going to want to listen up. We just launched our integration with Raiser's Edge, which means you can see your fundraising data synced directly into your donor database without even lifting a finger. It means no more downloading reports, cleaning things up, uploading reports, deleting duplicates. We've literally taken that all away from you. So back to your hidden donors, you'll want to look for a couple different types of donors in your data set. And like I said, I guarantee you all have some hidden potential high-value donors sitting there waiting for you. So the first one you're going to look for is people like Catherine, who made a donation, or Lizzie, who donated a bid for $1,500. And you can see them both on the side here. They are clearly telling you that they believe in your cause and are keen to keep supporting you. You'll want to make sure that you also look out for people like Todd, who had additional dollars to spend on an item add-on. He went above and beyond with his purchase and how he engaged and got involved with your fundraiser. And so I would encourage your team to reach out and thank him and see how we can get him even more involved. And finally, there will be some individuals like Jerry. They placed a live auction bid for $3,000. Now, maybe Jerry didn't bid on anything else in your live auction, or maybe he didn't actually make any significant gifts during your event. But by placing this bid, although not the winning amount, he showed you that he was actually willing to give $3,000 to your cause. How can you engage him, and how can you continue to educate him on your organization and start to convert him to a donor for your cause? And with all these hidden donors, how can you and your team nurture them to become long-term supporters that consistently contribute to your organization? Because again, at the end of the day, we know that all fundraising events and campaigns, from raffles to galas and golf tournaments, are really all about one thing. It all comes back to your donor relationships. Now, we've just walked through how you can see similar success to what Aimee saw with your next fundraiser. So starting by launching your fundraiser, adding a donation upsell, and then gathering the information to identify your long-term potential donors. And as we've walked through these, like I mentioned, Trellis can help you with every step of it. We're the only fundraising platform to offer ticketing, donations, auctions, e-commerce, and a Canadian ERS-approved raffle system in a single platform. And we're also the only platform that's offering donation upsells in this specific way right now. And with options to upsell at checkout, to donate auction bids, and to create bundles, we really believe that your fundraising can be even more effective than what it is. And we can help you make sure that you feel like the fundraising that you're doing is actually worth it, because we're seeing the results come in, and we're also seeing them multiply as you start to convert those donors into long-term supporters of your cause. And finally, with our Raiser's Edge integration, we are quickly becoming the go-to platform for individuals and charities that are using those tools as well. But as we end our time here, and before I ask Aimee to come back up and join me again for our live Q&A, I wanted to leave you all with some actionable steps. I just threw a ton of information at you, and it probably felt a bit like a fire hose, and that's okay. But hopefully with these steps, you can know what you can do next in order to dig in a little bit deeper and figure out how you can change the way that you're approaching your fundraising this year as an organization. And so what I did is I identified 3 different buckets that I think each of you might fit into at this point. So first, it's the individuals who are already running an event. This is perfect timing. If it's not too late, I would consider how you can add some donation upsells. And if you're using Trellis and you're not doing donation upsells, then also message somebody right away and we will change that for you. But again, I'm just going to encourage you to download that guide that we've put together that walks you through how you can raise more at your next event. And it actually digs into really a lot of the pieces that I just mentioned a little bit deeper. Justin and Amor from the Trellis team, they're going to throw that into the chat right now so you can download a copy of that. For those of you that have an event coming up soon, this is perfect timing. It's a great time to connect with our team, and we would love to help you brainstorm how can you raise more, and what are some strategies that you can take as you start to approach your fundraising here moving forward. We're also going to throw a link into the chat for that. You can use that link to connect with our team, and that's going to be appearing in the chat just momentarily. And then finally, if you're curious how you can implement these tactics into your organization, 1, we get it, and 2, I respect the request for additional insight and information around how this could help your organization. Again, I would recommend connecting with our team. We're going to throw a link for that in the chat here too shortly. Should be coming. So you can connect with our team on that link. You can reach out to us. We would love to brainstorm with you, understand more about your organization, and just consider what are some ways to help you grow your fundraising. But with all of that said, I'm going to invite Aimee to come off mute here, and then let's open up the floor for some questions. I know some people have thrown them in the chat here, which is great. I will quickly scroll through and we can start answering those. But if you do have any other questions that you have not written down yet, this is your moment, throw them in there, and we're going to jump into it. So I saw there was a question for you here. So somebody said, this is great that it worked for SPCA, but will it work for other organizations that don't have massive following or province-wide recognition? Aimee, do you want to jump in and answer that? I mean, you've worked with some other organizations too, and then I can also add in some additional thoughts at the end here.
Yeah, I think my first thought when I saw that question was my previous organization, we did a $20,000 raffle every year. So significantly smaller than the one we did here. And would I have loved 7% more in donations and unrestricted funding on top of that? Absolutely. So I think it's important. You talked about that 7.6%. Nobody's going to turn that down. Nobody's shying away from that. So I think no matter what size your organization is at, or no matter what size your raffles or any of that, an extra 7.5% in unrestricted funding is always a great thing. So yeah, I think everybody can learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as cliche as this sounds, SPCA when they started was not doing raffles of 250,000, right? They started small and they continued to grow and grow and grow. And so as you continue to grow your organization, and as your fundraising evolves, these numbers will increase for you as well. Like I said, I mean, these strategies, and like Aimee just mentioned too, these strategies are really designed for any organization size. And so I do think you can be really effective with that as well. Another question that came in for you, Aimee, was how big is your donor base and which channels have you found to be the most effective to attract new donors?
Yeah, so obviously we're a fairly large organization with a donor base that spans all across Alberta as well as outside of the province. Which channels have we found to be the best for attracting new donors? Is that specific for like new lottery donors? Yeah, so for new lottery donors, we have found definitely social media ads have been really effective for us. Our email, so even our email people outside of our existing donor base has been really successful. And then we do a direct mail campaign as well. So we do some unaddressed mail drops that have been able to bring in a lot of new lottery purchasers, and many of those have then turned into donors as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was another question for you that said, how have these donations taken away from other general donations that you would have normally received, like your winter appeal, given that the timeline was actually fairly close?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely something I was thinking about in December. Is it's great that we have this new influx, but is it just existing donors who are just not giving to the winter appeal or to end of year giving campaigns? And I don't have a great answer for that yet, just because we haven't finished our integration with Razor's Edge. So I'm not able to look at necessarily who typically gives in one area and did they then just exchange it for a lottery gift. But I will say anecdotally, what I started doing was just pulling out lottery donors and looking them up in Razor's Edge to see, do they typically give an end of year gift? Is it something, are they now giving this instead? And I actually found a lot of our monthly donors were making a one-time gift through their Trellis lottery purchase. So they're already monthly donors. They also are lottery purchasers, and they're making a one-time gift through Trellis. So in that sense, I don't think it was taking away, because they weren't typically making an end of year gift. This was just a one-time lottery gift. So that was really great. And then I did find a lot of donors who gave sporadically through the year. So they might have given to a campaign in Q1 or Q2, but not necessarily always in Q4 and then now turning into a lottery donation instead. So I would say for the most part, no, that was not our experience. And we did hit all of our other campaign targets at end of year. So I feel like for the most part, it was just additional revenue.
That's awesome. And I mean, we're chatting specifically about your organization today. But in a lot of the other organizations that I'm supporting, they're doing the same thing and they're seeing really similar results. And where they're not seeing a decrease in general donations go down. I also had somebody ask me the other day, does it impact things like a paddle raise at a gala when we've now got donation upsells throughout the event? And it actually hasn't. I think people are, again, they're keen to support your cause. And I think especially pairing that with sharing your story and your impact and your testimonies and your stories of life change, people are really excited to support you. And so across the board, we haven't seen a decrease in donations in other areas. And so I think it's just been overall relatively successful for most individuals here. Next question that came in is, how do I start the conversation of adopting technology and donation upsells to my change adverse boss? I'll jump in and take this one. I think the first thing I would do is I would just kind of share some of those numbers with them in terms of how it's going. A lot of those numbers, and actually some more numbers around, what kind of engagement are we seeing with donation upselling? How much of an impact is this having on causes is actually all in the guide. So if you haven't yet, I'll quickly download that guide and you can also use that. We have actually also created a one-pager in the guide specifically for you to pass to your change adverse bosses or boards or whoever it is. It's actually just a one-pager that's just filled with stats that you can just literally hand to them. And hopefully that will start the conversation. But beyond that, I always encourage people, look at some examples of other organizations and see what they're doing. And again, if you want to see some other examples of other fundraisers on Trellis, my email is on the screen. You can reach out to me. Or again, we shared some links so you connect with our team. Please do that. And we would love to share those examples because it's hard, right? You're trying to move forward and you're trying to raise more money for your cause and you need the support. So we would love to help you do that. The last question that came in here, perfect timing, is how were you able to convert your yearly donors to monthly donors? I think in more so in relation to your fundraiser here, Aimee. If you've seen that yet, and if not, that's okay.
Yeah, no, are you talking specifically, I guess, about our lottery donors to monthly donors or just more general?
Yeah, I think so. If whoever wrote this question, if you want to add some more context, feel free to do so. If not, let's run with that. How did
Yeah,
you
and I don't know,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, I don't know that we actually have converted a lot of our lottery donors into monthly donors. I don't have those stats yet. I hope that that's the case, and certainly we do some pretty heavy pushes around monthly donor acquisition at different times of the year. And so having that information is very helpful, certainly. But our goal, certainly with our lotteries now, is just getting them to make a one-time gift. And then from one-time gift, to go back to your earlier point about relationship building, that's our starting point for the relationship, right? So they've purchased a lottery ticket, they've made a one-time gift. Now is our chance to reach out and tell them a little bit more about who we are, what we do, what the impact of their gift is, and what the impact of their gift could be if they were able to convert to a monthly gift.
Yeah, and I think, the conversion piece takes time, but like Aimee said, it really all comes down to that relationship and donor relationships. And like I mentioned briefly at the beginning too, with Trellis and with our fundraising platform, that's really the approach that we've taken the whole way through is how can we make a platform that's going to allow you to have all of the information and the insight you need to help you with the donor relationship piece. So let's, one, make it really easy for your donors, and two, let's add donation upsells so that afterwards you're going to be able to identify the individuals who are choosing to give more, who are choosing to participate, so your team can then focus on that. And again, the integration, the piece we're really excited about and why we keep talking about it is because we know that if your team on Monday morning after a Friday night event can come in, open up Razor's Edge, and then just start getting on the call on their phones and saying, hey, I saw you were bidding, or I saw you made a donation upsell, thank you, and writing those notes and doing all those pieces instead of uploading reports, that's like a massive win for your cause. It takes a lot of the stress off, yes, but it also means that you can get back to the donors faster, which is really important. So we're gonna wrap up our time here. I also just wanted to quickly say, I saw a few people were asking about an integration with Kiwa. I love that. We would love that too. So we'll see. We'll keep you posted how that one's going. And somebody also asked about tax receipting. Yes, we do tax receipting, and like Aimee said, again, just makes it really easy for you with just one less thing to worry about. But thank you so much, Aimee. I really appreciate your time and just coming in here and just sharing a little bit more about what you're doing and some of the successes that you've seen so far. And I think it's been really valuable for everybody that's participated and joined us today. If you are in the chat and if you have any final questions, this is your last call to throw them in. But with that, I think we're going to wrap it up, unless Aimee, you have anything else to say on your end.
No, just thanks so much for having me. And yeah, thanks for everything.
Sweet. We are so grateful you were able to join us. We will be putting out a recording of this call. So again, if you have any of those technology adverse leaders on your team that you want to send this to, feel free to do that as well. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will chat soon.